Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I think we'll just pause briefly for a moment as numbers are building nicely. We'd like to give everybody the opportunity to join the webinar. So we'll just give it 20 or 30 seconds, please. Good. Okay. So hello and welcome. Thanks for joining us for the first session of our Oxford MBA Virtual Open Day. My name is David Fowler. I'm one of the senior advisors in the recruitment and admissions team. I'm really pleased today to be introducing you to Liam Kilby, who is the Associate Director of the Recruitment and Admissions team. So over the next hour, Liam will answer your questions that you put to him in a Q&A style format. We would ask you please to type your questions in the Q&A box or the chat box at the bottom of the screen. So with the help of colleagues Megan and Franzi, I'll be doing my best to work through your questions and in a conversation style format, put these to Liam so that we can cover as many as possible and make the best use of the time available. Just for your information as well, at 10:30 today, UK time, we have a further Q&A session that will be run by colleagues in the recruitment and admissions team. So the focus of this is more on process, admissions, applications type queries. For example, questions on GMAT, GRE, clarification on English language, test scores, student visas, that kind of thing. And then later on today at 12 noon, we also have a careers team Q&A run by our colleague Dan Kiernan, who will give participants the opportunity to ask questions about the Careers Development Centre at Said and how they will support you in your career search should you join the MBA programme at Oxford. But coming back to the session this morning, whether you're early in the MBA consideration process and or indeed you're well advanced in finalising your application, Liam can offer you some great insight into the Oxford MBA experience and how it may align with your future career goals. So we'd encourage you to take full advantage of this opportunity by posting your questions this morning. So just to get things started, I'd like to put a first question to Liam to get his thoughts on a key question really that many potential applicants ask. And I'd also ask Liam at the same time if he could just tell us a little bit about himself. So the question to Liam is, what are the key attributes, Liam, that you look for in a strong MBA candidate?
Thanks, David, and morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. It's great to be here. It's great to have you with us today. Let me do the introduction part first. I'll get to the question in a second. So as David mentioned, my name is Liam. I'm the Associate Director for the MBA Recruitment and Admissions team here at Oxford. So my job is to head up the department that is tasked with finding and talking to and supporting and encouraging the best and the brightest MBA candidates to submit an application, hopefully join us on the program, and then go on to do great things in their career. I've been here for about 5 years now, just over 5 years. My first 2 or 3 years were in the recruitment team, working within both North and South America. And then a couple of years ago, we merged the recruitment and the admissions team into one department, into one function. And then I was promoted to the AD of that function. So that's a little bit about me. With regards to the attributes that I think both I and my team and the wider school look for in a good candidate, there's probably 2 or 3 that I'll mention. One is a sense of curiosity that allows them, drives them, makes them want to explore that intersection between what is traditional business and what is social responsibility, social impact. And that doesn't mean that you have to be an entrepreneur. Of course, entrepreneurs are welcome, but you don't have to have your own enterprise that's trying to create impact in the world. You can be working for a multinational, you can work for large organizations, you can work for a McKinsey or a Goldman Sachs or a BlackRock and still want to have some influence, some impact on social change, on social good, on social responsibility. And that kind of area, that intersection that I talked about, is one that we delve into quite deeply here at the Oxford MBA. And so a level of curiosity around how you can help in that area, the role that as a future potential C-suite executive you can play in that area, the level of influence you might have in that role, and how you can exert that influence in that area. That curiosity, those questions, is something that I think fits quite well with what we're trying to teach and what we're trying to get you to think about and critically analyze here at Oxford. So that's probably one thing. The second thing is a level of collaboration. In my first 2 years working at the school, I would speak to candidates that were considering a range of MBA programs across different institutions. And one of the things that sometimes put them off applying to a certain school would be that they got the impression, or they'd heard anecdotally, that school's environment culture was a little bit competitive, and individually it was people trying to grow themselves and succeed themselves, but by stepping over other people on the way to get there. And I think what we try and do here at Oxford is bring you along as part of the whole, as part of groups. So while there is some individual study and there are some individual exams that you can fall back on in terms of your performance if you're a strong exam taker, there's also a lot of group work that we do, and a lot of work in study groups and in teams. And so a level of collaboration, a level of being able to work across functions, a level of being able to work with medium, large, even sometimes small groups of people to be a success is something that I think we look for both in the application and certainly in the interview. And the third thing is probably just a level of tenacity, which you think might be quite common in an MBA student. You've all worked hard to potentially get yourself to this point already. You'll work even harder if you're still to put in an application and then get onto the MBA. But a one-year program isn't for the faint-hearted. It can be quite intense. It can be quite busy. A lot of the time, you are having to prioritize and balance your time between schoolwork and reading lists and preparing for a presentation that your team is giving the next day. But also here at Oxford specifically, you're trying to balance your time with the wider experience and what being a member of the University of Oxford first and a member of the business school second gives you access to with regards to clubs and societies and sports teams that you might want to join, and activities and hobbies that you might want to try for the first time. And that's a real part of your experience and a real part of what is a very transformational year. So I don't want people to think that we want the hardest working people. We want people that work hard, of course, but we're also looking for people that can recognize the opportunity that Oxford can give them to grow maybe outside of that business school sphere and bubble, and think about how they want to grow as an individual or as a person, and develop new skills and new networks and new friendships and new contacts in the wider university network as well. So they're probably the three things that I would say, David, that spring to mind straight away when somebody asks that question.
Thanks, Liam. Some great points to kick off this morning. Please, everybody, the questions are coming in really nicely. This really is your opportunity to ask the questions that you really want to ask. So please do. While I wait for other ones to come through. Another question, Liam, that people ask quite a lot as well is, what do you believe are the really unique key elements of the Oxford MBA experience?
Yeah, it's a question that we get quite often, as you say, David. I think I've touched upon a couple of them in my previous answer, so I won't dwell on those too long. But you have the wider college system, you have the wider Oxford network that allows you to tap into a second network of people that aren't studying business. They're not at the business school with you, but they are studying a whole host of other things around the university. That means that when you sit down and potentially have dinner with them in your college in the evening, once your working day at the business school is finished, you'll have conversations that will expose you to different ways of thinking, to different ideas, to different ways of approaching a problem that you may have been stuck on in your business school cohort earlier in the day. And so it's a real opportunity to tap into that and kind of grow your mindset in that way. That's one. But that's more about the experience rather than the focus of the MBA. So let me focus a little bit on that. As I mentioned before, that intersection between traditional business and social responsibility is an important one. I saw a question, I think, in the chat around, is the Oxford MBA better suited than maybe others for people that are interested in social impact? And I don't like the word better. It's a different way of looking at things that I think I would prefer to use. It's not about we are better than others. I don't think we have more of a focus on it. I think that's fair to say. And so while some schools might have a social impact club that you can join, or they might have an elective around social impact that you can do for a finite period of time throughout the year, I think one thing that sets us apart, at least within Europe, is that question around how can I use my role as a future leader within the world or within my community in a more of a micro environment to really impact the well-being of my workforce, my community, my region as a whole. That does drip through everything that we do at the school, both in terms of the core modules. When you're thinking about finance and analytics and accounting, we'll still use that lens to look through. And then things specifically like our Go-To project, our Global Opportunities and Threats Oxford project, which takes the learning you've got from the first semester and applies that to a systemic issue that we think the world is facing now or will face in a couple of years. And that topic is often aligned to the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. So it's very topical, it's very contemporary. And that is just one example of how we try and use the MBA and take traditional business learning and have this lens of applying it to a system, applying it to real examples, real challenges that the world is facing. So one of the things that stand out for me that would be different from other schools is just the focus we have on social responsibility. And again, that in many forms, it doesn't have to be entrepreneurship, it doesn't have to be intrapreneurship. It can be working in a large multinational and still being in maybe a CSR position. The message that I think I want to send here is that we're not just a school for people that are looking to work on power or sanitation or fresh water in developing countries. Those people are absolutely welcome, and you will find those people here. But we're also a school that is strong in the traditional outcomes too. So if you're looking to get into finance or consulting, those big two areas, if you're looking to get into tech, which is a growing area, I think, for MBA outputs from schools around the world, then we can help you with that too. So the message is we have an extremely strong base in the fundamentals of business, and we apply to that a layer that is focused on the role that you can play as a future leader to really think about the challenges that are facing the world.
Thanks, Liam. That's great. Thank you. Great. So your questions are coming through really well now, everybody. Thank you. The first question I think that's still on a lot of people's minds is around the pandemic. And this is a question from Ashish. They are asking, how were the classes and other activities run during COVID lockdown? Fingers crossed, hope there isn't a lockdown in the future, but given the uncertain times we're in, I was curious. Yeah, and it's a very fair question. And let me just add my fingers being crossed to the hope that there won't be another lockdown in the future. We kind of did it in stages. There have been stages of the pandemic that have been easier and sometimes harder to do what we would like to do at the school. So if you cast your mind back to, I guess, proper lockdown, when, you know, in the UK here, people were advised to not really leave their house. They would go out for a half hour of exercise each day. That was the government guidelines that we had. Clearly, everything there was fully virtual. And so we're talking about lectures happening virtually. We're talking about career events happening virtually. We're talking about things that you would normally expect from an Oxford MBA, about having
dinner at your college and sitting down with your friends and with your wider cohort, your wider university cohort. That just wouldn't happen. If you were at the school, you would go to the college, you would go to the dining hall, you'd maybe get some food, you take it back to your room and eat it there. So it had a huge impact on certain aspects of the MBA. And those aspects were really the networking side of things. It's a huge part of an MBA for a lot of people, is building those networks and meeting what is a very internationally diverse cohort. And so the thing that we immediately saw the impact on was that kind of networking ability. Delivery of the lessons changed, of course, to virtual. And there were some growing pains there with the speed at which we had to transition to a fully digital delivery. In terms of the technology that we had in the school, a lot of it was good, a lot of it was new, a lot of it was being used for the first time. A lot of it wasn't quite stress tested to the point that a pandemic will put the stress on it. And so we had to learn very quickly. One of the parts of what we developed that was received very favorably by the school, by the students especially, was something that we call asynchronous content. And what that essentially meant was, while your main lectures happened and they happened virtually, faculty were also pre-recording smaller bite-sized chunks of teaching that would be held in an online repository, an online library that you could dial into as a student and pick and choose the learning parts that you wanted to go over again to kind of redigest. It allowed us to reinforce some of the concepts that were being taught in the virtual lessons, because the whole Q&A, the whole debate, the whole discussion dynamic that we like to encourage in an in-person lecture is more difficult to engender in a virtual learning environment. And so a lot of the time, some of the concepts that you would get from faculty may have been harder to take on board because you didn't have the opportunity to talk with your fellow students about it in class in the moment. And so we supplemented that learning with extra asynchronous material. And that's one thing that has stayed, even though we're now back teaching to the room as much as we can, and we're back in person as much as we can be. And I'll be in the school later, and I was in the school yesterday, and students are walking around and going to their lessons in person. We've retained the asynchronous content because it now allows us to insert more flexibility into your day. If you're not having 2 lectures a day that are 3 or 3.5 hours long, because we can trim that down to 2.5 hours and then supplement that with asynchronous learning that you digest in your own time, it gives you more chance to reinforce that learning still, but also tailor your schedule to fit in other things like the career networking events that are happening in person again now. The other networking events, you can go to a college dinner that are happening in person. And so it just gives you a bit more freedom to strike that balance that I mentioned in one of my first answers between what does my MBA demand from me in terms of time, and what does my experience of Oxford want to be, and what demands does that have on me in terms of time. Having that asynchronous content that you can kind of dive into and digest in your own time allows that flexibility a lot more than it used to when your 9 to 5 working day was very much lecture theatres from 9 until 12:30, 45 minutes, an hour for lunch, and then lecture theatres from 1:45 until 5 p.m. There's no flexibility in that at all. And so one of the benefits, one of the learning points that we've really struck from the pandemic is the flexibility we've been able to put into the curriculum. Now, moving forward, just quickly, obviously we don't know what will happen in the future. New variants are being discovered, as we know, and they are sometimes more serious than others, sometimes will spread more wildly than others. And so we're still teaching to the room. That's our plan. The government guidelines haven't necessarily changed. The university guidelines, which are separate from the government guidelines, also have not changed. And so people are still in their lessons face to face. We very much hope that doesn't change. However, if the situation worsens to the point where the government expects that we tighten the regulations again, we have the infrastructure in place now, we have the technology in place now, we have the experience of the last 18 months to see us through what will hopefully be a short period, but also will be something that we are now used to and comfortable with and won't be new for the first time. So keep everything crossed that it won't happen. If it does, I'm confident that very well placed to make sure that the student experience, as much as we can control it, isn't impacted in any negative way.
Thanks, Liam. I think it's important to get that question in up front, because I know it's, it must be on a lot of people's minds, and it's a big investment that you make in your MBA. The next question is something quite different, but equally, I think, on the minds of many students: when to make your application. So this is a question from Andrew. He says, is there any advantage to applying in earlier rounds from an admissions perspective, or is the admission rate similar between rounds?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Andrew. Thank you, and one that has a yes and a no answer. And so let me do the yeses first. Are there any advantages? There's probably a couple. One of them might be fairly shallow, but it depends on what you're looking for from your Oxford experience. So one of them is, as you know, probably if you're accepted onto the MBA, you'll also be a member of one of the colleges of the University of Oxford. Colleges are offering out spaces on almost a first come, first served basis. Now, most of the departments at the University of Oxford that have application deadlines don't actually start taking applications until November. And so college places generally aren't being given out until the first batch of those November applications are considered and offered. And so maybe the new year. So if you apply to the MBA, we're the only department that has a September deadline. So we have two before Christmas, one in September, one in October, November time. If you apply in those early stages, you'll be at the front of that queue for the college that you want when the colleges start to consider, okay, it's time to start filling some spaces. Who do we want to give a space at our college to? The people at the head of that queue will get first dibs. So if there's a college that you specifically want to be a member of, then applying early gives you the chance, or gives you more of a chance. It doesn't guarantee anything, but it gives you more of a chance that you'll be accepted into the college that you want. So that's one benefit that some people will think, actually, I'm happy just to be there. Any college will be fine for me. And so applying early just for that, just for the college, isn't worth me rushing my application. And that's something we'll go back to in a second about making sure you apply at the right time for you. But colleges is one thing. The second thing, which is probably a bit more relevant to more people, is that some of the scholarships are given out from stage one to the people that apply early. Not because they've applied early, they don't get it specifically because they've applied in stage one, but we have a substantial amount of money that we can give out each year. We don't want to wait until we get the bulk of the applications under our belt before we start giving that funding out. And so some of the funding that we offer will be offered from stage one. Same principle applies here. If you're amongst the first people to apply, you'll be amongst the first people that we review for scholarships and funding. And so there's a benefit there to you as well, that if you think funding is an important part of my journey to the MBA, and I can understand why it would be for a lot of people, it's an expensive thing to do, as David was mentioning just a few moments ago, then funding might be more of a reason that you choose to apply early. Having said that, we have scholarships that aren't even considered until after stage 3 in January. We have scholarships that start in stage 1 but run throughout the entire year. So we'll still have money to give in stage 4. So no scholarship is completely exhausted in stage 1. So while you'll be at the front of that queue, you'll still have a chance in the later stages to get that funding as well if you're deemed as though your application is strong enough to warrant it. So it comes down to the intake at each window, at each stage, the ratio of people that are offered at each stage. That's another very important part of this question. Stages 1, 2, and 3, September, October, November, and then January for stage 3. We see a fairly large fluctuation of the number of people that apply. But because of that, we will just offer a number of different interviews. And so the percentage of people that are interviewed in the first 3 stages is very similar. Therefore, the percentage of people that are offered a place in the first 3 stages is very similar. So in terms of, are my chances of being admitted different if I apply early? Then no, not really at all. Apart from colleges, apart from scholarships, there's no real value to being admitted in the first couple of stages. After stage 3 is done, where we see the biggest chunk of our applications, the class is beginning to get quite full at that point. So stage 4, which is often around March, sometimes maybe April, depending on when Easter falls, stage 4 can be a lot harder to be admitted in, just because we have a lot less space to give. And so we then will hold fewer interviews, because we don't want to bring a lot of people in for interview when we only have a finite number of spaces left. So in terms of admission, stage 4 is probably one to avoid, unless, and this is the biggest thing that I can say about this question, unless stage 4 is the best time for you to apply. And I mean that in lots of different ways. Family commitments, things that are happening at work in your career, full-time jobs that take up a lot of your time and a lot of your effort and your energy, GMAT or GRE prep. Have you taken the exam? Do you need to take it again to get a score that you're happy with? Do you feel as though you're rushing your application and submitting it too early and not showing us the best version of yourself just because you're trying to get in for stage 3? And if that's a yes, I feel as though this is not quite my best work, then you should wait until stage 4. Because even though it will be harder potentially to get in, the strong candidates will still be interviewed. We keep spaces back on purpose because we know life gets in the way and some people can't apply until stage 4. And so while it's slightly harder, and while some of this funding may be a little bit thin on the ground because we'll have been giving it out since stage 1, and while the college that you want might be full, it's still worth applying in stage 4 if that's when you can provide your best application. So that's the first question you ask. When can I do my best? And then everything else should fall into place after that based on things like funding and colleges. And if they aren't important, when is the best time for me to apply? That's the overriding decision that you need to make for yourself, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, Liam. I want to come on now to a question that's been put by Narisa, which I think is really around the profile of candidates. Narisa asks, Liam, how do you evaluate the short-term career goal of the applicant? If I would like to switch industry, function, and location, would it reduce my chance of acceptance to the program, since it might appear that I have a lower chance of employment post MBA? So I think it's probably a question around the profile and what influence your post MBA career goals have on how your application is assessed or viewed.
Yeah, and another really wise and sensible question. So in my time at the school, in just the 5 years that I've been here, guys, I would say that the focus in my first year for the school was a bit more of what traditional Oxford is, which is academic strength. Is your GMAT, GRE score high enough? Is your undergraduate degree performance strong enough to be admitted to the institution, to the University of Oxford? And that has changed over the last few years, especially within the MBA, because this is a practical degree. This is designed to get you a job that you're looking for, to accelerate your career, to pivot your career in a way that you're seeking. And so while we still want academic strength with the University of Oxford, that will never change. We're also now looking at you as an individual, your application, and asking the question, are you employable? Can you get the job that you tell us that you want on your application immediately upon graduating from the program? Can we, as a school, in a one-year program, with the help of our colleagues in the Careers Development Center that you'll hear from later today, can we add all those things together to get you the skills and the network and the experience and get in front of the right people to get the job you're looking for? And so that question becomes a very serious one. And so what we look at is the experience you've had so far and what sector that's been in and what job role you've had within that sector, the skills that you've been able to learn and develop and build from that role. We look at what we can give you in a one-year program, what skills you're looking to develop and grow, or maybe even gain for the first time while you're with us for that 12 months, the activities that we'll run in the careers team that will help you support the journey that you're looking to make within this space in the next 12 months. And we add all those things together and we ask ourselves, does this equate to what you tell us you want to do when you graduate. And we speak to our careers colleagues, we speak to other people around the school. The admissions committee is a large, wonderful, ever-growing thing. And we'll make a decision based on that question. And so a tip and a piece of advice that I would give anyone that's looking to submit an application over the next few weeks, few months, year or so, is that really think about how you're phrasing your current work experience and how that has built a solid enough of a foundation that with a one-year MBA and with the skills you can learn from that, you'll be a success in your post-MBA goal. So in response to the specific question around if I'm looking to change a lot of things, does that make me less likely to be admitted? No, not at all. I think there's probably more of an onus on you to tell us why changing all of those three things is still realistic in a one-year program. And that's a really important thing that you need to understand, is that a big part of the application is you showing us how you're already almost there and that one-year MBA can help you, but how you've also taken some proactive steps to understand what you need to do and how you want to grow. So it's really encouraging when we see in applications that people have reached out to the recruiting departments of the companies they want to go and work for, that you've already held conversations with them to understand what profile they look for when they're hiring MBA graduates. You've had those conversations already. So you know what profile you need to embody when you graduate. You've taken that the next step further and you've already thought about, well, how do I already embody that profile and how do I not? And what skills can I talk about in my application? What skills can I talk about in my interview that I know that I need to develop in order to fully embody that profile by the time that I graduate? The onus is on you in your application to make sure that you tell us this story about what you're trying to do and you provide enough of the plot of that story that we have no questions around how likely you are to make this work. We might still have questions, but it's just questions that are built on the back of seeing the proactive level of undertaking that you've already done in your search for that goal already. So by all means, come in and change everything about your career. There's no issue with that at all, but just bear in mind, you'll probably have to go into a bit more of plot development to keep that analogy going than somebody who's looking to return to the same company, but maybe accelerate into a more senior position. That plot is a more simple one, and therefore we will naturally have fewer questions. So we welcome applications from everybody who's looking to return to a family business, start his or her own business, make a very drastic change and change geography and sector and job role and function and change everything. We want to hear from all of you, but each one of you will have different levels of detail that you'll have to go into in your post-MBA career section to make us feel reassured that we can help you get to where you want to be at the end of our 12 months with you.
Thanks, Liam. This is a question which I think is similar to the previous one, but I think might just help to give candidates some reassurance. So the question is, how do you look at older candidates with around 8 to 10 years of experience?
I personally look at them favorably, David, because they remind me of me. But on the whole, I would say they're very welcome, and they're very welcome for lots of different reasons. One, we don't have an age limit in the MBA. We really don't. If you are more experienced and maybe beyond 10 years, maybe 12 to 15 years, we might in the team have a conversation with you around what you're looking for from the MBA and not just about the learning, but also who do you want to be surrounded by? And would a more senior group of people that match your experience be more suitable for you on the executive MBA, for example? But it's your decision entirely what you apply for. No one is going to get turned down from the MBA just because he or she has a bit more experience, is a slightly older than other candidates. The age range in our MBA, even though the average is around 28, 29, the range is from 24, 25, all the way up to 38, 39, 40 sometimes on the MBA. And so I don't want people who have 10, 12 years of experience thinking, oh, well, I can't apply because I'll just be told that the executive MBA is the one for me. we'll have that conversation. But if you tell us that the full-time MBA is the one that fits your personal lifestyle and family commitments and where you are in your career, and you're able to provide a compelling story around why that is the best one for you, then of course you can apply. Of course you'll be considered. We, unlike some other schools, we don't take your application and force it down a certain track in terms of program based on your profile, based on your age or your experience. Because people that have 10 years of experience have been through things in their professional career that people that have 2 years of experience just haven't had the chance to do yet. And so when we're trying to build a cohort that is engaging and diverse and as interesting as possible, and we want to build a culture that allows you to learn from your peers as much as you learn from faculty, we need people that are beyond the 2 years of experience, because otherwise everyone would reach a ceiling quite quickly in terms of the experiences they can bring with them into the classroom to share in those discussions that we like to encourage and engender in the lecture theatres. So the overarching, overwhelming message here is that don't let any level of experience put you off from applying. If you think the MBA is the right thing for you and the full-time one-year program is the right version of that for you, then we still want to have that conversation and we would still welcome your application.
Good. Thanks for that clarification. So we've got about just over 20 minutes left. Please do keep your questions coming through. There's some really good ones, but take every opportunity to ask the question that you want to ask. This is a question about our 1+1 MBA experience, or our 1+1 MBA program. Many of you today who've dialed in may not know too much about the 1+1. It's a 2-year program which offers the opportunity to combine an MBA with a master's degree, an MSc, in a list of partner programs. So maybe, Liam, the question is here, how many hours of classes are there per week? But I think more broadly than that, could you just give us a flavour for the 1+1 program? Because we do get a lot of interest in it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll answer the specific question first. Your first year in the 1+1 program, and so it's always this way around. You'll have 2 degrees, 2 one-year degrees. The first 1-year degree is a master's degree in the wider university in a subject of your choice. And the second year is the MBA, is the 1-year MBA. It's always the MSc first and then the MBA. It's 2 very different years. So to get to the question, in terms of hours of classes per week, on year 1, which is a little bit more of a traditional academic Oxford experience, you'll have fewer hours in terms of lessons than you will in year 2, which is a traditional 2-year MBA condensed into 1 year. It goes back to being intense that we talked about before. So the idea behind the 1+1 is a program that is designed to give you a real depth of understanding in the first year. You'll become an expert in your field, and that can be a field in terms of public policy at the Blavatnik School of Government here at the school. It could be the Oxford Internet Institute if you do something like social science and social data science, or social science of the internet. It can be the School of Geography, and you can talk about water conservation, you can talk about environmental change. There's a whole host of partner programs you can pick from, and I would encourage anyone who's interested or in learning more about the 1+1 to have a look on our website. We've also got a session sometime in the new year, I think, with some 1+1 existing students and some alumni. It's more of a panel session, and I would encourage you to look out on our website for details of that as it's coming up and dial into that. So you take your learning from year 1, which is the depth of knowledge you would get from an Oxford master's degree in your chosen topic. And then in year 2, you would apply that learning into the breadth of business principles and practices. And so when you graduate from the 2 years, you're essentially going to be in your future career a leading expert in your area that you've chosen. If you think about something like communicable diseases as an example, there are probably 5, 10, maybe people in the world that are the leading experts on that area. The 1+1 is designed to give you the background to, at some point in your future career, be a leading expert in your chosen field, because you'll have the depth and the breadth of that 2 years of experience. And so it's not for everybody, because some people think, well, the MBA for me is designed to further my career in a very specific way. I don't need the depth of what can be a very deep area of expertise. I don't need that. The MBA on its own is enough. And so the 1+1 is just an extra year of tuition that I have to pay for and an extra year away from my career. But for the people that are looking to really kind of come out of that and in their future career be a renowned leader, a renowned voice in this field, then the 1+1 is probably the one that you want to think about, because it takes what can sometimes be a little bit of a niche area of interest and applying that to the second year, where you think about global challenges and how you can apply business principles along with the depth of that first year to solve those challenges. Then it really does set you up for future success in 10, 15, 20 years time. I think that's probably my answer to that, David, I would say.
Thank you. This is another good question, which I think we can probably look at a little bit more broadly than how it's been posed here. But the key question is, how approachable and accessible are the professors? And maybe you can just talk more broadly about teaching style.
Yeah, so approachable and accessible both vary. The faculty offices for the MBA faculty are all on site. So your lecture theatre is kind of stretched down one side of the corridor, and then above that corridor are the offices of most of the faculty. The others are on the other side of the building, but they're all on the same campus. It's a very kind of open door policy. You can go up and knock on the doors and ask some questions if you'd like to. You'll develop relationships with faculty because we try and build a ratio of faculty to students that is not too overbearing in terms of students per one faculty member. We have about 66 full-time faculty working on the MBA, and our class in an average year is around 320 people. So it's about 1 in 5. So 1 faculty member to 5 students. You'll know them by name. They'll know you by name. They'll know your backgrounds. There's potentially some opportunity to help with some faculty research if that's an area that you want to get into. That is dependent on the faculty member and the area that they're researching in. In terms of teaching style, it's case study for a lot of what we do. It's general classroom discussion for a lot of what we do. It's working in teams and presenting your ideas back to the group as a whole in lots of what we do. And there's some individual learning in there as well. So a lot of the time, the faculty member will stand at the front of class and maybe just have one PowerPoint slide on the board to get things started. And that slide will have an open question. And he or she will then just encourage someone to start the conversation around the classroom. Other times it's a slide deck, and there's much more of a concept that they're trying to get across to you. And other times it's much more technical skills in terms of finance and analytics. And so there's a whole variety of teaching styles that will depend on the individual person, of course, but will also depend on the content and the subject that they're trying to teach. But they're not standoffish in any way at all. One of my favorite stories that I like to tell here is that every Halloween, there's also always like a costume, fancy dress thing that happens around the school, and not everyone always takes part, and students generally drive it more than staff. But one year, a few years ago, everyone decided that they would all dress up. And I mean, everyone decided that they would all dress up as their favorite lecturer. And so they all came in wearing the typical kind of outfit you would see this lecturer wear in class. And they all kind of did him the honor, the compliment of dressing like him. And it was just really nice to see everyone walking around with the same outfit on, out of respect for this faculty member. So that's the kind of relationship you can expect to build. And human nature means that some people will be easier to build that with than others. Some faculty members are incredibly busy and therefore might not have as much time to build that relationship. But as a whole, as a thing, the faculty as a group is one that is very open to discussing ideas and hearing about what your thoughts are. We have town halls, MBA student town halls, where faculty will be present and we can give feedback and you can give feedback as a student, and we can have very open discussions about what's working well, what small changes can we make in the teaching style or in the case studies that we use to try and impact your learning in as positive a way as we can. So it's a very open and honest dynamic that we kind of engender within the school across all levels, I would say.
Thanks, Liam. This is a question again from Ashish. We do get a lot of help and support from alumni after they leave Oxford, and they're also incredibly helpful to students and potential applicants coming in. So I think Ashish's question possibly relates to that, but even more broadly, what are the benefits and services that Oxford MBA graduates get even after they graduate?
So there's probably a couple of ways of looking at this. One is ongoing career support. So your relationship with the careers team does not come to an end as soon as you graduate. Please bear in mind that the careers team's focus will be on the incoming class because they're only with us for 12 months. And so that has to be their main driver, but there's still outreach available, there's still support available in your career post-MBA, even if you found a job and you've graduated into a role, you can still speak to the careers team and think about the next steps and support that they can offer for that. So there's ongoing wide careers team support, and you can ask specifically what that kind of support can look like for you in the session with the careers team later, and I would encourage you to do that. We also have an alumni relations team, and that team's sole responsibility is to make sure that as an alum, you feel engaged and included and part of the ongoing Oxford family. And it's almost a bit of a cliche to say the word family, but that's very much what we try and engender here at the school and at the wider University of Oxford. So the alumni relations team will be the team that's in charge of making sure that you receive communications from the school, that you receive updates about what's happening. We're having a change of dean in the not too distant future. And so that will be something that obviously the alumni will take great interest in. And that's the kind of updates that we're talking about. We'll have official alumni chapters that the alumni relations team will help run. Those chapters are dotted around cities around the world. And so if you're looking to be an active member of that chapter, you'll work with the alumni relations team to make sure that maybe as the head of that chapter or as the co-chair of that chapter, you'll be passing on that information. You'll be working with the alumni relations team to make sure that your chapter feel involved and loved and nurtured post-MBA as well. So there's a whole range of things that are available to you. In the recruitment and admissions team, we often lean on alumni quite a lot for things like open days and things that we're looking to encourage people to apply. We're looking to encourage people to accept their offer and come to the school, because your voice as a member of the alumni community is authentic. You've done the program, you've lived and breathed that experience for 12 months. You know what it's like. You're able to tell, hopefully, a very positive story about the career you've been able to forge post-MBA. It's firsthand experience. It's not just me or my team talking about our opinion of the MBA and our view of that looking somewhat from the outside, even though we're members of the school. None of my team have done the Oxford MBA. And so it's important to have that authentic voice in there as someone that a potential student or an incoming student you can connect to and really kind of understand what it's going to be like on the program. So the alumni relations team will help with that. As a member of the alumni, you'll have a range of opportunities and a range of support that's available to you. And if you wanted to, we'll make sure you're an active member of what we do in the recruitment and admissions team, because you're really important and valuable to what we do as well.
There's a question here about careers. Now, we do have a Q&A at 12 o'clock today, but I think it would be useful to just touch on this point here in terms of this question. So, Liam, would you say the MBA program is also suitable for someone looking to discover his or her post-MBA career during the course of the year, rather than being absolutely clear about it before you come to the school?
Yeah, this is an important question. Is it suitable? It's not unsuitable. You're creating barriers for yourself if you decide that I want to go to the MBA and then figure out what career I want. One, because it might get in the way of being admitted. We've talked already about the important role that your career plan plays in your application and as part of the interview. And I don't think that your interviewer will take too kindly if we say, tell me about your post-MBA career goals. If you were to reply with something like, I'll figure it out when I get there, and of course you won't use those words, but that's essentially the message that you're giving us. No matter how you dress that up, no matter how you say that, it's going to sound like you haven't actually thought about it yet, or you're waiting for some inspiration to hit while you're on course, and that might not go well in the interview. So that's one barrier you're making for yourself. The second barrier is, even if you are admitted, you're giving yourself very little time to figure it out. For example, consulting firms will come onto campus in end of October, in November, to hold interviews for roles that they're looking to fill in the summer next year. And so if you decide after 3 or 4 months that you want to be a consultant, you'll have missed the recruitment window for on-campus recruiting by firms like McKinsey and BCG and Bain and Dahlberg and LEK and all of those other companies as well. So you're creating a barrier for yourself that includes not leaving yourself enough time to get the job that you want. And that can be tangible things like the interviews that I've just talked about, but it can also be important things like, I've now decided 6 months in that I want to go and do X. I now need to build the network. I now need to get some skills, and I need to think about the electives that I want to take to be able to tailor my learning to make sure that I'm ready when I graduate. But actually electives started the bidding process 2 months ago. And because you didn't know what you wanted to do, you weren't bidding for the right ones. And so it's a dangerous thing. It's a dangerous mindset to come into a 1-year program. If it was a 2-year program, it's much less important because you have much more time to be able to figure those things out. You can do the internship in that middle summer. That it's much more of a traditional way to really kind of find yourself and find your interest and find your spark. So is it unsuitable? No, I don't think it's unsuitable, but it's probably not a mindset that I would encourage for the reasons that I've stated.
Yeah, thanks, Liam, for that. I think we're coming towards the end of our session today, but I wondered whether we could just close with a question that helps people who are about to embark on the application process. So I think the question, I would frame it in this way, is what general advice would you give to candidates who are about to start preparing their application?
Probably a couple of things. The first one might sound like it's trivial, but it's not. Don't underestimate how much time the GMAT or the GRE will take. And I don't mean on the day. Everyone knows it's like 3 3/4, 4 hours thereabouts. But in terms of prep, in terms of balancing your family life and life with your children, if you have them, life with your partner, if you have one, life with your full-time job, life with other commitments that you have. Some people have a natural aptitude for standardized tests and can rock up to a GMAT with a couple of hours of skimming through a book and get a 700, and other people can study for 100 hours and get a 650. And so understanding which one of those people you are and creating enough time in your schedule to really get the score that you want and that you deserve and that shines the best light on you, for some people, can be a huge undertaking. Access to test centers in the country that you're in can sometimes be an issue. The availability to pick any date that you want for the test can be an issue for some people in some countries. And so there's a lot of planning that has to go into that. Because even though the GMAT score on its own, and my colleagues will talk about this in the next session, I'm sure it is not the be all and end all. It will not make or break your application. To get the score you want could take a significant amount of time. So my first piece of advice is don't underestimate how long that might take. The second piece of advice is a bit more general, and it's just, I would encourage everyone in their application to allow their personality to shine through. There's a lot of applications that we get with similar profiles and similar backgrounds wanting to do similar jobs in the future. And if you were to kind of find a way to take a marker pen and strike through that person's name and personal details and just read the essays, or you read the work experience, or you read the post-MBA career plan, you would be forgiven for thinking it might be the same person because they can be quite homogenous and similar. So allowing us to see who you are behind the GMAT score behind your undergraduate degree, behind what your work experience tells us about you, your personality, your passions, what drives you, what your ambitions are, and why. That kind of information, while some people might think has no place on a business school application, I would strongly disagree, and allows us to see the more human side of you. Are you a good human being? Do we want to add you to this amazing pot of human beings that we're trying to build in the cohort? Because while we still want academic strength, and while we still want good career plans and for success for you as an individual and for us as a wider school in a much more selfish way, more than that, we want to know if you can be part of what we're trying to build in terms of this melting pot of personalities and experiences and cultures and religions and races and every aspect of diversity you can think of. Can you be part of what we're trying to build? That's the question that we ask ourselves more than anything else. And if we can't see that because your application is a bit monotone, because it's black and white, your GMAT score, your undergraduate degree, your essay, it's all written down, and you might write it with passion, but does that passion come through when we read it? Like find a way to jump out from the page at us, because we want people that will spark imagination and ideas in their colleagues, and spark imagination and ideas in the faculty, and challenge in a respectful way, and get involved in debates and be a team player and all of those things that we've talked about. But it's difficult to find a way to do that in an application. So think of any way that you can. And the Kira videos help, the essay helps, the interview definitely helps, but it's very important to do that, because otherwise, when it comes down to picking between person A and person B, and we only have one space left, and person B might have a better GMAT score, but person A has been able to show us who they actually are beneath the surface a bit more efficiently and effectively, I can guarantee you person A will get picked over person B every single time. So it's really important that you do that. And that's probably the thing that I'll leave you with as the overarching piece of advice.
Thanks, Liam. That's a great way to leave our Q&A this morning. So that draws our conversation with Liam to a close today. I'd like to thank you all for your active participation. Really hope you found this helpful. I'd also like to thank Liam for sharing his insight and his advice during the session. Sorry if we didn't answer your question live today. If you would like to pose your question separately, we'll put the Oxford MBA email address into the chat. Also, if you would like us to undertake a profile review, we'd be very, very happy to do that for you as well. So, in addition to the two further Q&A sessions today already highlighted, we also hope you're able to join us for our current student panel webinar at 2 p.m. Local time. This will give you the opportunity to hear from a panel of our current students from around the world, their backgrounds, their advice, and why the Oxford MBA was the right program for them. And then finally, in the next day or so, you will receive a follow-up mailing, which will feature links to a number of other recorded webinars, which we very much hope you will find useful as well. So thank you again. We look forward to you joining our recruitment and admissions Q&A in around 30 minutes time at 10:30 a.m. today. Thank you again, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone. Nice to meet you.